Hey everybody, welcome back to the Business of Enterprise IT. It's a podcast brought to you by InfoSystems. I'm Josh Davis, the Marketing Director at InfoSystems, and today's special guest is Nate Vaughn, Business Transformation Executive. That's an awesome title, by the way. I mean, it's a little different, might be a little cliche. We hear business transformation a lot, but for a good reason, right?
By all means. So first, thank you for
you're welcome.
having me here today. So again, Nate Vaughn, Red Hat. I've been with Red Hat for about 6 years now, and it's a wonderful culture that I'm so proud to be a part of. You mentioned business transformation. We hear that a lot. Digital transformation.
Digital transformation, there's plenty of the buzzwords out there. Yeah.
Exactly. So with Red Hat, what I do specifically around that area is help enterprises along their journey to, in this case, the cloud, right?
Yeah.
A few years ago, probably about 5 years ago, it was more virtualization, right?
Yeah.
So when we talk about transformation, it's always about evolving those businesses so they can better compete with competition.
Yeah, kind of the way I think about business transformation, I had a very interesting episode of our podcast a while back, and it was with a very long time, well-respected industry thought leader, and his thing was, hey, business transformation is always ongoing.
Exactly.
It's not something new. Businesses have been transforming since they've been a business. Yeah. And so, business transformation is always an ongoing process, and if business leaders can get their mindset into, always transforming and keeping up to date, then they won't see, technology providers like Red Hat and companies like InfoSystems as, trying to come in and make a quick sale, right, but more like a long-term partner where, hey, you're going to need business transformation related to technology forever.
100%.
It's not going to stop, and so you want a trusted partner or trusted partners along for the ride who can help you get there. So, sorry, when I did the introduction, I left out Red Hat part. So yeah, you do work for Red Hat, and we've got the nice prop here. Nate was nice enough to bring along some red hats, yes, for us to distribute. So much appreciated. So today we're going to talk a lot about Red Hat and open source and what that means for business, because really we're talking to business leaders here, and this podcast series really addresses some of the larger companies, mid-size and enterprise-sized companies, and the business leaders who are really trying to grasp technology because they know how important it is to the future of their company. Where in the past, CEOs, let's leave CIO out of it, but CEOs and CFOs and things like that probably paid less attention to technology other than it being a line item on, the expense report or the P&L.
Sure.
Now, executives are paying a lot of attention. So speaking to that group that really tunes into this podcast, let's start with kind of the foundational messages of what is Red Hat and what does it mean to these guys,
right?
Men and women.
Men and women.
I don't want to say guys and people think I'm, leaving out.
A little sexist. No, of course not. So Red Hat is the world's leading provider of open source solutions, right? We work with businesses of all size, small, medium-sized businesses, enterprises, and large strategic accounts as well. It's interesting. A lot of times we think about open source and we think specifically about software, but it's important to understand it goes much beyond just software.
Yeah.
Open source is a method of collaboration, right? It's a way for all folks to come together, collaborate to build a better solution, right? Mm-hmm. So with Red Hat, what we do, and you probably remember us from the early 90s when we commercialized Linux, right? The free operating system. But since then, we have evolved our portfolio and capabilities to include things like cloud capabilities, container capabilities, and of course, all this is based around an open source development model, right? So how it actually works is after we after we communicate with our customers to find out what's important, what business requirements are important for them, right? We look to see how do we transfer that into a technology. Once that's done, then we look for open source projects that are either existing open source projects that actually take on that challenge, or we create our own.
Yeah.
Right? So we'll staff those projects, or we'll man them along with other community members, right? And we'll add patches and security to it, right? At some point, once we figure out that the code is ready for customer use, right? We'll take that code, we'll harden it, we'll throw some statistics around it so we can actually monitor, right? Are there any security issues related to it, right? And then we will provide that code to our customers through a subscription.
Yeah. So ultimately, I would guess that Red Hat has a very healthy collaborative environment of different partners and technology companies that you're working with on these open source projects. How much stuff do you all just do in-house versus how much stuff is sort of networked out through collaborators?
Well, give you an idea, Red Hat has about 5,000 developers that are active maintainers, leaders of open source projects.
Wow.
Right? So
That's
it's significant,
Yeah.
by all means. And that's worldwide. That's all over the globe. But like you said, we don't take this on by ourselves. We have some great partners, IBM, all the big ones, right? Your Dells, InfoSystems, right? So we never turn down a partner. We always have to understand how they and us can show value, right?
Yeah.
That's the big one. And it's interesting to point out that no two partners are really the same. They all come with different specific capabilities, right?
Yeah.
So we take our time to figure out how do we work with them properly.
Yeah, I was recently at a technology summit from one of our distributor partners, and they were talking about how important the regional IT companies like InfoSystems, where we mainly do business within a few hundred miles of Knoxville, Nashville, and Chattanooga, Tennessee. So that reaches down into North Georgia, North Alabama, the
Right.
western part of the Carolinas, Kentucky. We're a regional company, but we have really tight relationships with our customers in those areas. And so, the point was brought up at this conference that, and it was from one of the vendors, the main technology vendors, who said, we don't have those, we don't own those relationships. The companies like you guys do, and this was a conference full of IT executives, IT company executives. And so, and all of the vendors that sort of followed after that sort of echoed that sentiment that, the most important thing for businesses moving forward is going to have, for them to have that strong partner ecosystem. So whether it's an InfoSystems that has a direct relationship and really knows and understands the business because we've been working with them for a couple of decades, we're able to bring in the Red Hats and all of these other vendors, technology vendors of the world, introduce those companies into the equation because we're looking for the right group of technologies to provide the best solution for the customer. So, just an example of how, in open, whether it's open source or closed systems, there's partner channels for both, but especially in an open source, it's really important to have that team, that solid team. And so we love working with our vendor partners and all the different technology providers like Red Hat to, because when we implement something for a customer that really changes the nature of their business, like we started talking about business transformation at the beginning, then man, it's a good feeling.
It is.
That you see, wow, things really changed there. So anyway, let's talk a little bit more about Red Hat specifically. And
Sure.
so Red Hat is a distro, I guess is the terminology that's used. I guess that would be a version or a flavor, or so a distro of Linux.
Correct.
Which is an open source operating system. And so what do business leaders really need to understand about Linux or Red Hat as a Linux distro, and how that comes to play in the solutions that they may be using every day?
Yeah, that's great. So I think it's important, and it's kind of funny. I gave a speech recently to a group of educators in Nashville, and they actually weren't aware of Linux. They didn't have any idea what Linux was. But once we started peeling back the onion, they started to realize, well, Linux is running on their cell phone, right?
Yeah.
Android, right? A version of Linux. Or we see Linux really is the backbone of today's internet.
Yeah.
It's another one, right? Anything from your DNS servers, right, to most of the cloud,
Yeah.
right? But for the once you understand that, I think it's important to start looking at it from the business aspect, right? When you bring Linux into your environment, what you are saying is you are now taking control of this environment, right? We mentioned it's open source. That means you can modify the actual code. Now, maybe you don't have the expertise in-house to do that. That's why partners such as yourself or Red Hat or all these other solutions exist, right? So basically, when you bring in Linux, you're saying you're taking control of your IT infrastructure, right? And we're not saying that everything besides Linux is bad, right? There's a place for all of these different operating systems. However, you want to make sure that you're avoiding things like vendor lock-in, right? And that's really where it comes down to. You mentioned all these different flavors.
Yeah.
Yes, there are many different distros or flavors of Linux, right? Red Hat is unique in the fact that we harden everything from an enterprise perspective. You may have heard of security enhanced Linux, right? It's called SE Linux, but the term people usually use. And that is once again, another hardened capability provided through Red Hat Linux, right? This will allow, I apologize, the actual SE Linux aspect of it allows you to configure who has access to which resources of your system, right? Administrators, right? Sometimes you might not need an administrator to have access to certain sensitive data, even though they are administering that system that has it. SE Linux provides the capabilities to restrict just things like that, right? So we have more functionality, more flexibility.
So when business leaders are thinking about the technologies that they need to put into play within their organization, you mentioned earlier, it's not just the software application layer that we're talking about, but that's really the layer that the business leaders are going to think about first, because when we're talking about applications that end users, the personnel at my company is going to be interacting with to accomplish their job, to contribute toward the ultimate goal of why our company does business, to deliver services or products to our customers. It's almost like that's the first point of contact between humans and technology is you've got the end user device, but you're mainly talking about the software applications that are running on the device. And so speaking to the business leader who's really thinking about enterprise software applications, maybe it's ERP systems, maybe it's accounting and finance, or inventory, or maybe it's customer contact databases, or maybe it's some kind of specialized business process unique to the industry they're in, or something like that. I guess what I'm driving toward here is curious to find out how Red Hat comes into play at the application level, or if it's a next discussion. Once they get beyond the application level, then it's okay, what do we build it on?
Right.
You know, where does Red Hat come into play in that whole conversation?
So really, Red Hat is all through that conversation.
Okay.
We mentioned the OS, right, to start off with. Red Hat also has our entire middleware software stack that many enterprises utilize to build their applications. Those include things like a enterprise application server, EAP, or you may have heard of JBoss, right? It's a great Java application server. We also have things like Fuse, so you can glue together applications, right? Applications that are normally standalone applications, but you need them to work with your internal systems, right? So you can use integrations like Fuse. But it's interesting you brought that up, because as you're saying that, you know, normally enterprises come to Linux for that security, for the scalability aspects of it. But it's also, you know, pretty simple, pretty plain and simple that Linux is the future. If you look at all our partners, we have thousands of integrated software vendors, right? And you'll notice that they are all building their new solutions in these things called containers.
Yeah.
Right? Containers, once again, are Linux, right? They are Linux. You need a Linux kernel to run containers. So what this is, once again, providing is the footwork, if you will, to avoid that vendor lock-in. Since containers, you can move across different environments.
Yeah, and essentially when you talk containers, you're just talking about sort of encapsulating your IT resources in a way that it can be moved without breaking everything.
Yeah. You know, it was funny. I was with a customer a few weeks ago, and we were talking containers, and I think I said something about it's a revolution, right?
Yeah.
And when I got to the end of that presentation, a gentleman pulled me to the side and he said, "Hey, I really like that." He said, "But you know what? I don't think it's so much a revolution. I think it's an evolution." I said, "Really? That's a great point." And I got to thinking, you know, I've seen this before, right? Virtualization.
Yeah.
Right? We evolved to it. Right now we're evolving to containers. Now the interesting bit about containers, I don't really want to get too technical.
Yeah.
But if you think about containers, like you said, we're basically virtualizing the application, right? So VMware, KVM, we're virtualizing the OS layer. Now we're at the application layer, right? So instead of having a full-blown operating system that you have to worry about securing, right? It's a large attack surface, if you will.
Yeah.
So now with the container, you basically put just the IP or the software needed to run your application, okay, inside this container along with any dependencies, you know, your DLLs or right, those type things, but just need it for the application. And then you can run it on top of a container platform, right? We've got an excellent container platform. It's called OpenShift Container Platform. It's not just a container platform, but it's also a PaaS, right? So what that would allow you to do is not just run containers, but build containers, build applications quickly. We found that the majority of the time spent setting up a application. So in other words, setting up the IDE, the environment, getting all the software requirements and so forth stood up is considerable, right? So a PaaS will basically spin all that up for you, right?
Yeah.
So
PaaS,
developers.
just for clarification, you're talking platform as a service.
Yes, I apologize. I hate using acronyms without
Yeah,
defining them, but you're right. A platform as a service. So that allows your developers to just come in and code, right? Not having to worry about how to set up Eclipse, not having to worry about how to set up JBoss or some other web server, right? It's all done for you.
Yeah, and this is important because the complexity that IT has reached nowadays is unfathomable.
It is.
I mean, so if you're an enterprise company and you've got a team of IT people. You may have a few who are specialized in a certain area, but to have a specialist who can cover every single piece of the technology stack top to bottom is not possible.
Not possible.
So, I assume one of the points you're making here about the containers is you're making it to where fewer IT resources are needed to deploy that application, because a lot of it is pre-built, pre-architected into this container or platform as a service.
That's 100% correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. So how does the business leader who probably has an understanding of IT as what they see within their company. Let's be honest, executives don't have time to get out and peer network and talk about IT at other companies to learn how are you doing things. How can executives whose understanding of IT probably comes mostly from what they see within their own company, how can they understand when new technologies like this are available, the platform as a service that might enhance their ability to quickly build applications and deploy applications, or containers that would allow them to prevent lock-in within a certain type of infrastructure environment? How do they find out about that?
Yeah.
About how to bring that technology into their IT department? Because the things we're talking about are really the way forward that companies, this is going to be the future of IT. Things are going to be containerized, and you're going to be able to shift and move things around. And the platform as a service, software as a service, infrastructure, things are being designed to be delivered as a service for a reason.
Correct.
Because for a business, it makes more sense just to use what I need rather than build out full-scale environments that I might use a fraction of. So they're able to just right size, okay, what do I need to do this particular goal? What do I need as far as the software application goes? What do I need to run it? What do I need, behind it to store the data? All of those things are going to be delivered as a service.
Right.
And so, how does the IT or the business executive, not the IT, how does the business executive become aware of those things and begin to think about integrating it into their own IT department?
Yeah, that's really a great question, Josh. I think ultimately, those business executives are relying on partners like you and I. Mm-hmm. Right? It's really important, and we're not. None of this is vendor specific, right? This is industry. This is the future of all of our industry, right? It's funny. You probably heard folks say every business is a digital business. Every business is a software business, right?
Right.
All those things you mentioned, infrastructure as a service, PaaS, platform as a service, software as a service, all those are basically technologies, or not even technologies, I would say those are frameworks, right, to help you deliver those business results much faster.
Yeah.
Much faster. So, 10 years ago, if your business was caught in a fire and you lost all your systems, you're kind of out of luck.
You're out of business, probably.
You're out of business, that's right. But nowadays, with infrastructure as a service, right, you can quickly pull up your YAML, right, your scripts that define what your environment looks like, and quickly build that out in a matter of minutes, right? So it's amazing where we're at today. But you're right, the business leaders today have to make sure that they're aware of this, because their competition is.
Yeah, that's a great point. And businesses today are building technology. They're building their applications and technology for resiliency. This has to be where the business leader's mindset is when things go wrong, because we all, as a human, things are not going to be perfect all the time. So when something goes wrong, no matter what it is, how is our business going to be protected from that? Right. So it's a risk discussion, a resiliency. There's all these terms, business resiliency and continuity, and but ultimately you're just talking about how does our business survive the hard times. when we have a fire, when a tornado comes through, when some employee, disgruntled IT admin wants to cause damage to our internal systems, when somebody accidentally hit delete on some stuff that had some major there's so many potential ways things can go wrong, and especially when you're talking about more and more complex IT systems. Ultimately, what Red Hat and these technologies are bringing to the table now through the cloud services and all of the way things are being architected is resiliency inside your IT department.
Exactly.
Recover quickly, lose as little as possible as far as data, downtime, productivity, keep your business running. So after that rant, that's one of the things that's near and dear to us as InfoSystems, because when we're working with businesses, one of the stances we always take is, we try to get people to do things the right way, not the easy way or the cheap way or whatever, because you're just asking for trouble. You're taking on way too much risk. So we advise people to do things the right way, but that's where that sort of passionate rant came from. But I want to direct this back to, you're based in Nashville.
Correct. I recently moved from Atlanta to Nashville.
So talk just a little bit about what you're doing on a day-to-day basis for Red Hat in Nashville and Chattanooga, because you're coming to cities like Chattanooga and all around our region. What's your role? What are you doing day to day?
Well, first off, I want to make sure everybody understands it's definitely not just me.
Yeah.
I've got a awesome team, a specialist. I think I'm up to 22 right now. And they cover everything from automation to cloud technologies, right? To all the application development stuff we talked about, and so forth. So it's definitely not me.
Yeah.
I'm only here to deliver the message and to look good for the team.
Yeah. You got your red on, so you're
I
representing
got my red.
well.
Yes. Now, what do we do day to day besides helping customers? So every day I'm in with 2-3 customers, and we are talking strategy, right? I can talk tech. I've got 20 years tech behind me.
Yeah.
But I try to leave that to my super smart team, right? Because as you know, tech changes dramatically about every 3 years.
Yeah.
So you need to stay fresh, okay? But I do other things. I try to build the Red Hat name for brand recognition. I do open source projects with some of my customers. I'm actually doing an open source project with one of the customers here in Chattanooga, which is really neat. I help sponsor events and groups such as the WIT, the Women in Tech for Tennessee. We also sponsored the Scenic City Summit. I was able to bring our mobile portfolio center. Did you get a chance to see that?
Yeah, I went in there and recorded a podcast episode with Susan Johnson.
Did you really?
Inside the truck, the trailer, the mobile command center, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
It was impressive. That was a very cool setup.
Yeah, so for everybody that doesn't know, we have a 40-foot semi traveling the nation that showcases many of our technologies. And what I thought was really cool, when the semi is on the road, it's about 8 feet wide, right? But once they set it up, like they set it up at the Chattanooga Convention Center, it expands out to about 30 feet, right? So you can get I think they said it was 1,100 square feet in that.
Yeah.
So we do things like hold user groups in there. Sometimes we do executive briefings, things like that. I'm also a member of the Nashville Technology Council's Board of Directors. So my focus there is really around providing strategic leadership, right? But also, I really think it's important for us to give back. So I like to do a lot of events that feature kid code camps, literacy programs, and I like to integrate my customers with this. Right. So I don't do any of this on my own. I'll make sure it's in line with one of my customers' and their goals, and then we'll come together and partner or something like that.
Yeah, that's great. InfoSystems is involved in a lot of local, especially in Chattanooga, which is where our headquarters is, a lot of local initiatives to bring technology to people who may not normally have access to technology, whether it's through, code camps or different types of training programs through the community college or other things like that. That's definitely something we're passionate about too, is advancing technology and encouraging a more diverse environment within technology in our communities.
It's interesting because that's really the core of open source.
Yeah.
Right. I don't know if you're familiar with Richard Stallman, right? Mm-hmm. Well, Richard Stallman really he created the Free Software Foundation. Also, a lot of people know him as the creator of GNU, the GPL, mm-hmm. right? The license. And his whole idea was that there are so many people out there that don't have access to technology, right? They can't afford it, right? So let's give them the option through a free and open source community, give them access to to these solutions,
yeah.
right? So that's really at the heart of Red Hat. That's really what I'm all about as well.
Yeah, that's great. So I want to close on kind of the topic of where Red Hat is going. We've brought up cloud several times throughout the discussion, but talking about Red Hat being confined to the data center, I mean, probably in the past, most of when people thought Red Hat and Linux, they're talking about the servers and infrastructure that power their data centers.
Exactly.
So how is Red Hat moving beyond that?
Yeah, I actually listed some of the things here. And it's funny because that's my biggest issue when I walk into a customer for the first time. When I walk to their organization, usually they see Red Hat as Linux only. Right? We are not Linux only.
Right.
We love Linux. Don't get me wrong. That definitely is our core. But we cover 6 primary technology areas. You mentioned cloud, middleware, operating system being Red Hat Enterprise Linux, virtualization, right? We basically have KVM. Mm-hmm. We do storage, both file storage as well as object. Mm-hmm. And then we also have a large mobile presence. Now, besides the technologies, we also provide training as well as services to install, deploy, and basically to train up your IT staff. We're pretty much in every vertical. A lot of my customers are in healthcare, so that's a big part of us. I think I saw a statistic that every single healthcare organization in the U.S. has Red Hat. Now, it doesn't mean that Red Hat's the only operating system or the only technology, but every single healthcare is relying on Red Hat in some capability. I thought that was just amazing.
That is amazing.
So, yes.
That's both deep and wide when it comes to deployment of that technology. It's amazing all of the areas that you guys cover beyond just Linux and what we think of as the Red Hat Enterprise Linux. So anyway, to sort of wrap up, this has been a great discussion, and I want to make sure I thank you for making the trip from Nashville. You've got other work going on in Chattanooga. It's not like you're here just for us, but thank you for coming today to record the podcast episode with us, for representing Red Hat. But I just want to finish on that note. One of the things we've both talked about, both with open source technology and the importance of businesses having reliable partners to help them transform their business and prepare for what's next. We've gotten the message from our vendors. It's not IBM, Dell EMC, HP, Cisco. I mean, we're doing business with so many vendors. We maintain extremely strong relationships. We have resources who are dedicated just to maintaining those relationships, and they're involved. Our vendors are often involved in sales and service delivery meetings where we're talking about specific solutions for our customers, and they're actively working on projects with us to make sure things get delivered the right way. We've gotten the message from our vendors that the relationship between the IT service provider and the end customer needs to be just as tight as possible.
It has to, yes.
It's a focus of ours to, work with our existing customer base. Of course, we're always happy to bring on new customers, but really the customers who are already doing business with InfoSystems, we want to tighten up those relationships, make sure they understand from Red Hat what can you bring to the table. And throughout all of their technology that they're using, make sure they're in the best place to move forward. So, I just wanted to kind of finish with that thought from myself about how, so if anybody out there wants to know more about Red Hat and what these guys can bring to the table for your current technology stack or where you have planned for the future, please reach out to us, and we can easily bring Nate and his team in to figure out what's going on at your company and work on some solution. The fun part, like you mentioned, talking strategy is really what you do every day, with a couple of customers every day. That's the fun stuff. I mean, getting in deep with customers and talking strategy and where do you see your company, what are your limitations right now, how do we break through those things? I mean, that's what's so fun about the technology industry, is creating those real world solutions that are just helping companies move forward and become something bigger and better. So, if you're watching this or listening to the audio and you're an InfoSystems customer, please reach out. We'd love to get you in touch with Nate and his team or any of our vendors that we do business with. If there are technologies that you're interested in hearing more about and understanding how that can come into play inside your company, we'd love to come in and have that conversation. We're here for the relationship. InfoSystems is, if you want to call it a middleman or a channel, or ultimately the industry refers to us as a value-added reseller or a channel provider for the companies that are building infrastructure and software and coding and programming and building these applications and systems that are in play all across the world. We're really the channel that delivers those into companies to solve real world business problems. And so, we would love to engage with your team. Nate, any final thoughts or words?
Well, first off, thank you. But
Yeah.
I was listening to you, and you guys are a large IBM partner.
Yeah, we do a lot of IBM business. Yeah.
There was a recent announcement at our Red Hat Summit back in May. IBM solutions are all going to be certified on Red Hat containers. Actually, I think it's done now.
Yeah.
So if that's something any of your customers are looking at, all right, let's talk. But thank you all. I appreciate being here, and hope to be invited back sometime.
Yeah, thanks so much. Great episode. Thanks, Nate.
Thank you.